few days, maybe in a few hours, we kiss and make up, we go happily ever after. But mom, from that point on, always is very suspicious of my wife. Never quite looks at her as positively ever again. Always a hint of something negative. And that can fester and ruin their relationship. I don't need to go out. Now, if we were worldly, we'd say go out to the bar or go out for drinks. But being Christians, I'd say we wouldn't go out for coffee and sit around and here's us guys, or we're playing, whatever it is we're doing as guys, going for golf, going out to play ball, whatever we're doing. And then, there's this tendency to start telling stories. And, oh, my wife did this. Well, yeah, well, my wife did that. Well, my wife doesn't do this. Well, my wife fails in that area. In fact, she's even worse than your wife. And I'd much rather be the guy who sits there, at best, I'm sit there mute and not have a thing. But what I'd even be better is to say, well, guys, I'm sorry to hear about that. I got the greatest wife in the world. She's wonderful. And I'd have to really question, are those the kind of guys I really want to hang out with? Ones that are putting down their wives. And ladies, you may want to consider that for yourselves. Those are the kind of ladies you want to hang out with, the ones who sit around roasting their husbands. So I'm just saying that a man does not, he protects his wife's reputation. What does dad and mom need to hear? Dad and mom need to hear only the best things about your wife. And never the negative things. And always the good stuff, never the bad stuff. Next, a man is obliged to take the lead in the correction and discipline of his children. I'm going to read to you from John 15, which says, Jesus says, I am the true vine, and my Father is the husbandman. Every branch in me that beareth not fruit, he taketh away. And every branch that beareth fruit, he purgeth it, that it may bring forth more fruit. That's what the Lord does with us. There's a purging process. There's a cutting away of things that will limit the growth and productivity of that tree or of that vine. And so taking that into the home, as head of my home, I got to think in terms of, wow, my kids need some purging. And the Bible does give us corporal discipline, better known as spanking, as a tool for purging them. And now I would say that in my mind, that's best utilized preferably preteen. Once they're teenagers, you got to find other ways of discipline, taking away privileges and so forth. As young adults within your home, there's yet other means, not least of which is you're out of here. You don't want to honor your father and mother. You don't want to submit to our rules. Hey, there's a big world out there, and we've gone through that as a husband and wife. One of our 4 children, it came down to that she chose one way. We said it needed to be another, and I had to sit down with her and say, you do realize I cannot have you in my home on that basis. Yes, Dad, I know that. And so, and she did. She left, and so I'm saying it can come to that extreme, but that's what a husband. What's terrible is when it's all left on the mom, and dad just kind of dad's out there working his job. Dad's out there doing his own thing, and dad's not interested. He doesn't want to deal with the spanking. He doesn't want to deal with the crying. Doesn't want to deal with the tension and the drama. But it's all on her. And the wife, being the more emotional being, she feels it so much more keenly. And so chances are the kids will not be well disciplined. So the husband needs to take the lead on that. Now, I will say, and this is another part of the marriage series, but I do encourage wives, I'll put it this way, I encourage husbands to give wives the authority to discipline when dad's not around. I don't think it's good for the kids to be told, you wait till your father gets home. He comes home, and it's like, he can't be the good guy, he's the bad guy, right off the bat. It's like, oh, great, I can't play with my kids, I can't relax, I got to deal with this thing. And if the wife wants to earn her children's respect, they've got to know, I know how to swing a paddle too. And I know how to withdraw privileges, and I know how to deal with you. And it doesn't have to be always on your dad. But dad should take the lead in correction and discipline of children, because the earthly father represents the heavenly Father, and he must husband his family and purge his children as God would. Next, a man is obliged to answer his wife's spiritual questions. This is from 1 Corinthians 14. Let your women keep silence in the churches, for it is not permitted unto them to speak, but they are commanded to be under obedience, as also saith the law. The context is speaking in tongues. But apparently in the church at Corinth, it's not unusual for a woman to stand up and she starts speaking in tongues. It's very disruptive, right in the middle of the message. Or maybe they got in the bad habit of, Pastor, I got a question. And so the Apostle Paul's trying to put decency and order in the church. So it goes on to say this, and if they will learn anything, let them ask their husbands at home, for it is a shame for women to speak in the church. And that's not saying can't speak like, hello, hi there, can't give a testimony, can't make an announcement for a ladies' activity. We're not going to take it that far. But we are talking about when it comes to speaking in tongues, it's forbidden for women to speak in tongues in the church. And by the way, almost every Pentecostal church you'll go to, who takes the lead on speaking in tongues? Almost always the women. Just another indication how unbiblical it is. But as far as speaking up, speaking out, wanting to challenge the male leadership, I think there's a way to go about it if it needs to be done. But taking speaking out at church service, I think it's what's here being prohibited. A man is obliged to determine the type of training his family will receive and who will administer it. This comes from a fascinating pair of verses in Galatians chapter 4, in which Paul says this, now I say, and what I should say it this way, what he's teaching is the position of the Old Testament law in the life of a New Testament Christian, and how it's there as a schoolmaster. It's there to instruct us. It shows us the mind of God. We are no longer under all the demands of the law. Many of those things have been put aside, passed away, but there are still things to learn from all of that. And so it's a schoolmaster to us. So Galatians chapter 4, now I say that the heir, someone who's going to inherit something, the heir, as long as he is a child, differeth nothing from a servant, though he be Lord of all. We'll pause right there. Here's the scenario. You got a wealthy man, and he has a son, and that son's going to inherit everything that the dad has. And so he's going to be Lord of all one day. But right now he's still a kid. He's a kid. He's not a little princeling. He's not a little dictator in the making. He's a kid. He's a child. And I think it's very important for our kids to remember, you are a child. You're quiet when the adults are speaking. We don't need to hear you coming in and taking over the conversation and trying to show off how smart you are. You just, when the adults are talking, you sit, be quiet, listen, and learn. But our thing growing up, I think for many of you, you don't speak until you're spoken to. If someone asks you a question, you give an answer. But you don't just interject yourself. Sometimes it gets wearying. Some of these children that just take over. And parents just sit back and smile like it's really cute. It's not cute. It's not wise. Anyway, so as long as he's a child, he differeth nothing from a servant. He's like a household servant. He's like a slave as a kid. He's there to contribute, not just to take. And here's what it goes on to say, next verse. But is under tutors and governors until the time appointed of the father. So while that child's growing up in the dad's home, the dad is determining who's going to be that child's tutors and governors. Now that's two different categories of instruction. So tutors, they give basic instruction. They're the teachers. So the dad determines who's going to teach my child. Not the state, not the local school district. You decide who's going to teach and what's going to be taught to your child. That's on dad. And I know we can sit back and complain, well, you know, they're teaching all this transgender stuff and acceptance of homosexuality and teaching kids, you know, safe sex. And, well, yeah, Dad, so how come you're allowing that? Why are you allowing that? Why'd you put them in that position? To be brainwashed like that. And so the dad decides, the tutors, and then the governors, they determine, you know, a governor deals with behavior. So the governor may take that kid out and show him that, okay, this is how a man behaves toward a woman. This is how a man behaves in public. This is how a man eats. This is how a man defends himself. This is how a man builds things and fixes things. That's governors. And so in my case, we try to be very careful who was teaching our children what they're being taught, not just in church, but also, and by the way, you should always keep your fingers on the pulse of who's teaching your children and what are they being taught, even in church. We've had it happen where stuff was being taught that was like, where did that come from? I didn't approve that. And I'd hear stuff like, you know, I'm on the verge of giving an example, but it's just time consuming. I won't go into it. But that's the parents just keep an eye and ear out for what's being taught, even in the church. And then, so we try to be careful, but also I try to put in my especially my son's life, but my daughters too, also to a degree, people who could teach them things they weren't getting from us. So we had a lady that taught our daughters pottery. We had a man that taught my son sailing, taught my son some basic carpentry and mechanical work, taught my son how to work in a janitorial business, and you know, hard work, hands-on cleaning. Those are all things. And by the way, all that stuff pays off in your child's future. All those skills. Look, you don't know how to cook. That's no excuse for your daughters to not know how to cook. Send them with, you know who the good cooks are in the church. Arrange for them to visit, and maybe go with them, so you can learn how to feed your husband right. And they can. But if you're busy and you don't have time to sit in on the instruction, if you can trust that woman to spend alone time with your daughter, take them, let her teach her. Let them teach them sewing, if you can't sew. Wherever the weaknesses are for you, there's people in this church that you can arrange to take care of that for you. And if there's any question about propriety, always make sure there's at least two. And so I only have one son. All right, your son and someone else's son can go over there and work on that car with that man. Let him teach things you may not know. Your daughter and some other daughter go to that woman's house and learn sewing. So I'm just saying, you decide, the tutors and governors. A man is obliged to provide the material needs of his wife and children. We're told in 1 Timothy 5, but if any provide not for his own, and especially for those of his own house, he hath denied the faith and is worse than an infidel. So a man's got an obligation to make sure his wife and children are provided for. Now, given the time and the desire to try to get some things done here, I'm gonna encapsulate the last section. A good husband will beware of leading his wife and family astray. The perfect example is Lot. Lot living in Sodom. What was he doing in that wicked city? He's in Sodom, and the angels come. The city, you must